So thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. I always so thankful for all our therapists who come to share the knowledge with our audience. It's always super, super important. We always get such good feedback from our therapists or in the audience, like, oh, I just love that y'all talk about this or y'all talk about that. And so we kind of get this question a lot in the DMs, like, should I be doing this in therapy? Or is it okay if I ask my therapist this? Or is it okay that my therapist does that? And I'm like, you know what? This is a really good topic to talk about. What some do's and don'ts in therapy is just what we kind of call it, but loosely some do's and don'ts of therapy. But before we get into it, I will allow you to introduce yourself. So let people know who you are, what you do, and how they can find you.
Awesome. So my name is Djuan Short, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm based in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, but I also service New Jersey. And I have my private practice and I do some coaching on the side, primarily working with like shadow work and individuals who are dealing with, developing self-love and transitions, whether that's career, relationship, things of that nature. I also wrote my first book. Hopefully you all can see it. If you can
Yes.
see, yes.
Purpose.
I wrote my first book. It's called Healing on Purpose, A Journey to Emotional and Relational Wellness. And how all of that came into play was just really, doing this work with women, primarily Black women, and seeing how the different things that we've experienced in early childhood has impacted the way in which that we show up in the world as adults. And through my work with the book, my work with my clients, one of the biggest things that I wanted to be able to give was an opportunity for people to learn how to heal themselves regardless of where they are on their journey, whether they are at the beginning cycle of deciding whether or not they need therapy, if they're actually in therapy. I felt like my book would be a good complement. A lot of my clients already have that. And then also thinking about if you are done with therapy, but maybe you need something to connect back with, I was like, this book would be really, really helpful. And so in the work that I've done, a lot of it has really helped people to transform themselves. And my clients call it almost like you kill off the old parts of you that are no longer servicing you. You recognize why you needed them. And then you go through like a transformation and then you come out like a phoenix rising on the end. And it's been an amazing experience to see my clients go through that. And I'm loving it because I also navigate those experiences for myself too. And I think that as therapists, as healers, we all are owed the opportunity to do our own levels of healing as well. And so if people are in the greater Philadelphia area, Pennsylvania area, I am 100% virtual. If they are looking for therapy, they can easily go to my website. It's Dahlia Rose Wellness, all one word, .com. They can schedule a consult with me. I believe my books might be closing at the end of this month and then reopening in January because we are booked right now. And if they can't get an appointment, they can just shoot me an email. They can also find me on Instagram. It's DARO Wellness, all one word again. I respond, and if they're listening to this and they're like, oh my God, Amber, like I want to get in contact with her, they can obviously message and you guys can send them over to me. I love getting my emails from Black female therapists. So saying that somebody's interested, but those are different ways that people can get in contact with me for sure.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I love that title of the book. So we'll come back to that though in a minute. So let's get into it. So if someone is starting therapy, right? They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. This is new to them, right? One other conversation I already had with a therapist is talking about just getting people over the hump to go to therapy, right? So once we get over the hump to go to therapy, what are some things that I should be looking for when I'm trying to find a therapist?
Mm-hmm. So first, I would definitely say make a list of the different things that you need to work on as an individual. So let's say you're someone who has difficulty with abandonment and it's been showing up in your relationships. You have difficulty trusting people. You have difficulty acknowledging kind of like what's going on with yourself. It's almost like levels of self-awareness, right? You want to make sure that you're writing things down that either people have told you might be areas that you need to work on. And I'm not saying everybody, but maybe people who you trust in their opinions, right? Like people who you trust to give you valid feedback. And then also your innate knowing of these are areas I need to work on. Make a list of those things. And then once you make your list, if you're deciding that you decide a Black female therapist is who you would like to work with, you can Google search Black female therapist, Philadelphia, New York, DC, whatever your local area is. And then from there, obviously, it's going to populate whoever's in that area for you. Now, as you're starting to go through the Google search and you're looking, you may say, oh, I found such and such. I really like her because she's a Black woman. But then you need to start looking at the specific things that she offers. What is she saying that is her specialties, right? Like for me, yoga therapy is a big specialty for my, spirituality, life transitions, career stuff, dealing with anxiety, depression. Those are really big in my wheelhouse. Trauma is really big. But if that's not something that you need, then I wouldn't be a good fit for you, or that person wouldn't be a good fit for you. So you want to make sure that whoever you're picking, that they're a good fit for what you're looking for. And then as you're identifying, you should always have at least 3 therapists that you're willing to do a consult with, right? I get people all the time who say, I found you, I really want to work with you. I think that that's great that you really want to work with me, but therapists also have the opportunity to decide whether or not you're a good fit for them as a client too. And so you may also want to acknowledge the fact that just as much as you're interviewing the therapist is interviewing you. So you want to have some options because the therapist also has options about who's a good fit. The other thing to be mindful of is whether or not the therapist is in your actual budget. You may want a therapist, but you may not be able to afford that therapist given where you are financially in the moment. And we're not trying to make anybody go into debt trying to get therapy to get healing, because then you will now have more financial traumas that need to be worked out in therapy. And that's a no-no. We're not trying to do that. So you go with what is in your financial budgets, right? It's like, we're not going to go to a high-end restaurant when we're on, a McDonald's budget, right? Like it just don't work like that. And that's not to demean anybody, but you need to know what is applicable for you, because if you can't afford therapy or you can't afford that price, then you're going to start to cut back on your sessions. Then you might start ghosting your therapist and just stop therapy altogether. And then that can also send you into a spiral of you not feeling good about yourself because you didn't you didn't keep a commitment that you decided that you needed to do in the first place, So I would definitely say making your list, identifying whether or not that person is a good fit. Does the budget work for you? And also recognizing whether or not you need virtual or in person, given especially now with everything with COVID, the pandemic. Most therapists are doing things virtually, and then some therapists are doing things in person. If you are someone who lives in a household with a bunch of other people, virtual may not necessarily work for you because you may not necessarily be able to speak candidly. So you may want in person. Or if you're coming for EMDR, some people feel like EMDR is a specialized therapy for individuals who have had trauma. That is also one of my specialties. It is something that can be done virtually, but some people like for stuff like that to be done in person. So you have to know, what do you feel like you need? And also I would do your research about what therapy actually means for you. We can all have these ideas about what therapy is, but you also have to be willing to develop an understanding about what you're getting yourself into as well.
Yeah, that's really, really good. One thing that I like that you said that we are not trying to make you go broke. We're not trying to have you in debt for healing. Do you have any resources for those individuals who are, I'm ready for therapy, and maybe I did find someone, or maybe I like you and I'm like, yeah, I want to come to you. What are some resources if I feel like I can't necessarily afford, $200 price? I'm just throwing that out, not saying your price in it or anybody's is $200, but I can't afford that every single time. Do you have any resources for people in need?
So one, I would say most therapists have sliding scale. And so you would always want to ask about sliding scale. Sometimes our sliding scale appointments are, or slots, they get filled and they may not become unfilled until a person finishes where they are in their healing journey with that therapist at that time. So you may decide, okay.
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
Can you just explain to people what a sliding scale is? Because
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Sorry.
Okay.
So sliding scale. So say for instance, someone has a $200 fee, and that's their full fee, right? So if the full fee is 200, a sliding scale could be, let's say 150 to 200, or it could be 100 to 200, depending on, what's in that therapist, their breakdown of their business of how they want to offer those appointments. And so the therapist may say, okay, I have 4 slots for people who cannot fully pay the 200, but if they can pay between 150 and 200, I can take 2 of them in that area, and then I can take 2 of them from the 100 to 200 times, sliding scale slot. And then as they are identifying who those slots go to, they may not have any more if someone else comes saying, hey, I saw that you had sliding scale. Do you still have that? How does that work? And so I normally say, because right now I don't have any, I'll be like, I don't have any. You can reach back out to me, but I also understand the urgency of you even reaching out in the first place. So let me give you some referrals to someone who might be within, the scope of what it is that you're saying that you can afford right now. And I will do referrals. So the other thing is the sliding scale, and then you have the low fees, which would be so some therapists do either pro bono, or they may have fees under $100, and they may have just allotted those, and that just really comes down to therapists needing to have a way in which they give back. And therapists, we give back in a variety of different ways. It doesn't always have to be by us giving up a therapy spot, but that may be a way in which a therapist gives up a spot. Another way could be, if they find a therapist, let's say on Black female therapists, but that therapist may not have any openings in the way in which that person wants it, but that therapist is also on, say, Open Path Collective, or Talkspace, or some other low fee site. They could also enter into that therapist catchment through those other sites, even though they identified them from Black female therapists too, and kind of get the price going that way, depending on where they budget wise, right? Another way to do it is also checking with your insurance provider. So some insurances, if you have a therapist who is considered an out-of-network provider, and you would just need to ask your insurance about that, how much benefits do you have for out-of-network? You may be able to get reimbursement for anything that's out of network. And so out of network really just means therapy providers or practitioners who are not paneled with your insurance company. And it's really up to the insurance company about how much they pay you back for those types of sessions. So those are a few different ways in which that you can, get your sessions paid for. Someone can also pay for it via grant. I have partnerships with nonprofits where I provide therapy services for high schoolers, and all of their sessions are provided via a grant, so it really just depends. There's also the Loveland Foundation, like we talked about earlier. And there's other agencies and companies that can provide some level of assistance if you need it. But I think part of that becomes a little bit more of a search and just figuring out what's out there that will provide assistance for therapy, especially now, given that everybody's moving towards mental health. And I was looking at wellness projections for 2022. Mental health and wellness is going to be even more at the top hierarchy of different things that we're going to be seeing next year. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's more money being pushed into people being able to have optimal wellness.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, it is, because we're hearing more people talk about it. More people are opening up about it. It sucks that the pandemic had to happen for it to start being on the radar, oh, this is important, because it's always been important. But hey, it is what it is. And now we are moving that needle forward in mental health, which is awesome. So when you go to therapy, are there any do's and don'ts in therapy? Should I, because we get this question a lot, or we'll get questions in the DM, can my therapist, should I say something to my therapist if she's texting while I'm in session? Or I don't like my therapist, I'm going to ghost her. Is that okay? Do therapists feel some type of way about that? Or can I do this or can I do that? And I think this is a good opportunity to let people know, like, okay, here are some do's loosely, here's some do's, and here are some don'ts in therapy. Can you give us some of those?
Right. So I will say this, I have been guilty for texting, and I've had a client be like, Djuan, like, and I think she messaged me. She sent a message outside of session. And, I was like, you know what? Like, she's right. I apologize. And I think what also has to happen is in those moments, clients have to be willing to say something to the therapist, right? Because in a lot of ways, therapist and client, like that therapist client relationship is a model for how the client should be in other areas of their lives. Mm-hmm. So the fact that the client can call the therapist out and be like, hey, I recognize that you're texting during our session, and that's bringing up X, Y, and Z for me. Mm-hmm. That says a lot about the growth of the client, but that is also something that can provide insight for the therapist. So I know when I'm texting, if something happens, it's probably an emergency or something is coming through that needs my attention right then and there. And for most of us, my cell phone is here. So if the light goes off, I may look and then come back. But 9 times out of 10, if I'm sending a message, it's because something needs my attention right then and there. And, just recognizing it's not meant to be disrespectful, but I get it. It's your time. You're paying for it. And also just reminding people, like, we're all human and there's room for error to happen in those moments. But I absolutely think that a client should say something, because, like, I'm a therapist and I've had clients who show up in sessions and, we might be high in sessions, right? And so it's like, that's something I don't think that you should be doing in session. But I also recognize that some clients need that in order for them to be present enough in order for us to get this work done. So it's like, you're always meeting the clients where they are. I don't think that you should, but I get why people do it. It's one of those things where it's kind of like, are you inebriated in a way where we can't actually do this work? Or are you present enough where we can get this work done and you can still do the healing part that needs to take place? The other thing that I would definitely say, the ghosting part, I don't like ghosting in any way, shape, or form, because it leaves a bad taste in your mouth about a person in a lot of different ways. And as a therapist, I think when we take off that hat, there's a person that's left there, and you don't want to feel negative about any of the clients that you work with, whether that's they ghosted you and they didn't pay their balance, right? That has happened to me a few different times. And you're like, this was in good faith. And a lot of it is now the therapist has to rework how they feel about clients, but that's also what makes therapists put policies in place that affects everybody else that they work with, So I would definitely say, if you find yourself not being able to afford your sessions or something is shifting, you should say something on the onset. The other thing is, if therapists have cancellation policies, right? Like, I have a 48-hour cancellation policy. If you sign the document saying that you acknowledge you received something, then you are held to that level of an esteem. And I think that because people are still understanding the importance of mental health in the same way they do physical health and things like that, there's still a new working that's happening around, if you're going to cancel, you have to cancel early in order for you not to incur a fee. If you need to reschedule, you're going to reach out early so that you don't incur a fee, right? It's almost like common courtesy, but I think in the mental health world, there's a different level of expectation that people will just be accepting of certain things versus when you're thinking about doctors and dentists and eye doctors and stuff like that. And so I think that that's something that's still evolving. The other thing, as far as like a don't, and we kind of talked about this as well, is, be honest. So I am of the mind that if you don't say something, your therapist can't address it. And also, don't drop bombs at the end of the session. Oh my gosh, right? Like,
I had that happen, right? Like right before, and I want to tell you this. You're like, oh no.
Right, and I'm like, you dropped that the last 15 minutes of session. What am I supposed to do with that? And here's the thing. All therapists know if you drop something at the last 15 minutes of the session, you never wanted to talk about it in the first place. So when you drop it, it's kind of like, oh yeah, here's this. You need to deal with it because I'm not ready to. So then in the next session, we want to pick it up and you're like, I'm good. But it's like you dropped it because you wanted something to be done with that in the first place. But when you do that, it also lets us know kind of like where you are growth wise too. Because normally if there's an issue, you bring it up at the onset versus at the end, you know? So I always tell my clients, you know, I may not always say it, but I am very mindful about how you are growing and what is evolving based on how you speak, based on your actions, based on how you engage with me, based on how I hear how you engage with others around you. And so, you know, the biggest do I would say is be honest, you know, come into your session with different things that you've experienced over the week that you want to process, because a lot of it is, you know, it's linear. But then there is elements where we have to go out into different aspects because of the ways in which your lived experiences are taking you, where it looks more like a spider web than a straight line, you know, so it just really depends on what's happening, you know, with you at that time frame. The other thing is, I think that a lot of people get into this mindset where it's like, I'm making these changes, I'm showing up and nothing is happening. I'm not seeing anything. Well, the biggest do is be consistent. If your therapist is giving you tools, strategies, and, you know, concepts, take notes. I tell my clients all the time, you need to have a journal for therapy. I may not always give you an exercise, but I'm going to give you a concept for you to think about. If you're not writing it down and you're just listening to me, I mean, for all of that, you could be listening to a YouTube video, right? Or TikTok, that's where most people go these days, right? So it's like, no, you are actively engaged in something where you're learning and you're incorporating. Because if you're incorporating, then that 1 hour you get with us is going to help transform the rest of the 167 hours you have in your week if you're actively doing something. So be consistent with your tools and strategies, and don't just be like, oh yeah, I did that deep breathing, you know, 4 days ago. Okay, so how did it feel? Oh, well, you know, it was okay. Did you do it again? No. But you know, I got stressed out. And so how did you do it? Like, oh, well, you know, it's like, no, I know change is hard, boo, but like, how long do you want to be doing the same thing? Because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So right. What are we doing? So yeah, I think the biggest thing is being consistent, following through with the things that you're saying that you're going to do. And the other thing that I find to be very interesting is a lot of clients expect that when the therapist is giving them exercises to do in between sessions, it's almost like I did it. I did the homework you gave me. And I'm like, listen, the homework isn't for me. It's really for you, right? Like, I'm not giving you an A if you did it. It's like, I know if you've done it because I hear it in how you're talking. I hear it in how you're navigating the world around you. So you should continue to do it, and it's going to come up. I don't have to always just check and be like, did you do what I asked you to do? It's like, do it and see how it's changing you. The biggest transformation is actually in you acknowledging the process that you went through in order for you to get the answers in the first place. Right. So those are just some things that I'm noticing about a lot of the clients that I deal with, and just things that I've seen over the years, you know, in my hopes that, you know, people will continue to evolve in their levels of understanding about what it is that we do.
Right. So then how can somebody prepare for therapy? Like they found their therapist. They're like, okay, she checks all the box. He or she checks all the box or whatever. I'm ready. How can I prepare and get myself ready for therapy?
So definitely, I would say the initial consult. So if you schedule your initial consult with your therapist or the therapist that you're thinking of, you want to make sure that you have questions in mind about, you know, how do they do certain things? If there's certain areas, like I said before, that you want to be worked on, how do they approach certain areas and different issues that you might be dealing with. You may not necessarily know specific treatment modalities, but you know if somebody has specialty in anxiety, like how would you help me deal with anxiety when it comes to being around my family for the holidays? You can ask whatever you want to ask. So I would definitely say have questions ready. If you decide to go with that therapist, 9 times out of 10, they're going to have intake paperwork that you have to complete. Complete the paperwork. Complete it, please. Right? Because if you don't complete the paperwork, it makes it hard for the therapist to know where you are by the time that you actually get on their books to meet. And so a lot of the paperwork can be based on how have things been for you 2 weeks prior to the date of the session or the date of the time that you're actually completing the paperwork. Complete the paperwork. It's not that hard. And on the onset, when things are happening, making sure that you're also updating if things need to be changed. So the paperwork is definitely something that I would definitely say to do, because if you can complete that, that also speaks to your level of engagement. I would also acknowledge, being very clear about what time frames work for you to actually have a session. So don't say, yeah, I can do Monday at 3:30, and then you really can't. And then you're constantly trying to move the appointment. And it's like, well, maybe you're just not really ready. Or don't schedule and then don't show, right? The no call, no show situation. The other thing that I would definitely say, if you're in the place and you're like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, and then you get there and you're kind of like quiet. It's like, okay. Right? Like you're the person who has the information. The therapist is there as the guide to help you sort through, get clarity, and, clear and release a lot of this stuff. So if you're waiting for the therapist to be like, okay, well, I know on Tuesday you did this, this, that, and the third, like that doesn't happen. You have to provide information too. So again, sitting down, taking some time to jot down the things that you feel like would be helpful for you to bring up in your first session, that would be helpful. Other things for you to know is like maybe some questions that you may have had in between the initial consult and the time of the very first session. And you can also take some time and be like, okay, maybe I want to Google some things, right? Like I'm recognizing, we go back to the abandonment. I'm recognizing I'm dealing with abandonment. These are some things that I'm noticing that have been significant in my life. I want to bring these up to my therapist, right? It's your time. So why wouldn't you be prepared for it, right? I go to the doctors and I'm like, listen, these are the things that I need you to do, right? Because they're on my time, so it's more about them becoming an active participant in their life when therapy becomes part of your life.
Right. Yeah, because it's not, I think sometimes two people want therapists to give them the answers, right? And it's not more like a team work of it. It's like, oh, I just want you to just tell me everything to do. And that doesn't work, right? That's not how this works. So I think it's also a lot of people are learning that it's a learning curve of maybe what you thought therapy was like. You have to definitely be an active participant in making the changes in your life, because that's why we're here, is to get some things different for you. So yeah, I agree with all of that. Any like books or resources or anything like that, if people are like, I want to get in therapy, I want to start, or I'm ready, I just want to make sure I'm ready, like, is there any type of resources or podcasts maybe that people can listen to like just even get them prepared for what's about to happen in therapy?
So I'm not a big podcaster, so I don't really have recommendations there. I will also say they can go get my book, Healing on Purpose, A Journey to Emotional and Relational Wellness.
From Amazon?
So they can get it from Amazon, and they can go directly to my website, and the link for the book is directly on the website. I would also say, in terms of books, about how to get prepared for therapy. I have so many books sitting around here. Look, I'm looking.
Because I have so many.
I have so many, but a lot of the books that I have are not specifically therapy-based books, like in the way in which you might be thinking about. So like one book that I would always say I recommend is the Boundaries book. I forget her name. She's the Black woman who wrote the Boundaries book.
Yeah.
I can't think of her
Nidra.
name.
Is it Nidra?
Yes.
Yes.
Her.
Yeah.
So I like her book a lot. I do recommend that one quite often to clients, primarily because I'm like, most clients need to understand boundaries.
Yeah.
The other one, a lot of my books that I read are very like neuroscience type books. So I would also recommend maybe The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, that's a good one. I recommend that one a lot too. Yep.
Yeah, that one. And then there's another book called Healing Developmental Trauma. I can't see who is the author right now. And then there's another one called Healing Invisible Wounds. Those might be a few books that I'm thinking of that are not like neuroscience. I'm a little nerdy when it comes to the books about mental health.
That's good though. That's good.
Yeah, so I think I'm a bit more on that side. Also, there's another book. I just got it. I don't know if you can see this one. So this is one that I will be, hold on. It's called Real Talk for When There's Nowhere to Go But Up, Black Pain. It just looks like we're not hurting, by Terry M. Williams.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
so
I have to put on my list.
Yeah. I just got this one. And then there's another one called Compassionomics, the revolutionary scientific evidence that caring makes a difference. And then, I would definitely say for people who are probably interested in like yoga, things of that nature, I have Dr. Gail Parker book, Transforming Ethnic and Race-Based Traumatic Stress with Yoga. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
This thing is making it so you can't see it.
Right.
But those would be some books that I'm reading right now, that also help to influence a lot of my thinking about therapy. But a lot of my other stuff is neuroscience, and people don't probably want to read that.
Therapists want to read that, right? But everybody else, I don't want to read that. Yeah.
I'm bad at books for other people. And then there's the one, what is it? Grandmother's Hands, My Grandmother's Hands.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good list though. I think that's a great place for people to start. So yeah. Well, this was a really good conversation. Thank you for all the gems that you have given me and the audience throughout this chat. Again, let people know who you are, where you're located, and how they can find you.
Yes. So my name is Djuan Short, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm based in the Philadelphia, PA region, but I do service Pennsylvania and New Jersey. If you are looking for a new therapist, or you're looking to find out more about like yoga therapy, things of that nature, and also like coaching around like self-love, life transitions, career transitions, you can reach me on my website at DaliaRoseWellness.com, all one word together. You can also find me on Instagram at DARO Wellness, all one word. You can also respond back to this video clip and be like, hey, I want to reach out to her. Can you point me in a direction? You can find me there. You can find me on Black Female Therapist. You can also Google me, Djuan Short, DJUANSHORT. You can Google me. And then you can get in contact with me that way as well. That might be easier. So this was fun. This was beautiful. I'm glad to have connected in this way.
Absolutely. Thank you again.